li-red, then which color we want to apply. For that list item color, we want red. Like this, we are defining. So we are configuring. But here we need to apply the color name itself. Color is $color. That means if first one is red, it will apply that red. We have to access that reference and bind it. Then here we have to use hash and $color. That means what it is going to do is it is going to get the color name and display here. We are going to get the color name and display here through the binding expression we are defining. Now, what happens is with one line, we can write colors for all of them. So we are reading every color and we are applying that color as color for the text. You can say color. So we can say background color. We can apply as background color. So, and we can apply alternative colors. So we can define iterations, conditions, both you can write. That means for others colors, how you want to apply. So here we will write another option. @if, we are writing if color is, that means $color is equal to, if the color is equal to yellow, if the color is equal to yellow, then what should happen? Color, we need to put it to some red. Color, we need to put it to red. Otherwise, that means else, we need to define color is equal to white. That means background color, foreground color will be changing accordingly. Inside the iterations, we are giving the conditions. Inside the iteration, we are giving the condition. That means if background color is red, green, blue, then it will apply white color. If the background is yellow, then it will apply the red color as the foreground. So a lot of conditions we have written here. And you see now in CSS, for all of them, these colors are applied. And you can see it looks in this way. It looks in this way. For list items, so we can change another option. That means here we are writing for list item. Wherever you configured the list item here, li. So color, so li color is suppose some black. Black, that means list item black, because we are keeping the content directly, and I will compile that. But so you see here when I refresh that, so that black color cannot be applied because these colors will dominate for that. And of course, so you want to change the list styles. You want to configure the list styles. That means, so unordered list, we say list style as none. All other options are same. We don't want to apply the list style for that. And you can see it will not be there. So for every list item, so we want every list item, we have like margin bottom. So some 10 pixels. Everything others are same. Only the point is when you want conditions and iterations, you can define through conditions and iterations. And you see here, it is going to change the background, foreground color accordingly. A sequence of colors are accessed. Sequence of colors are accessed from a collection by using an each, and we are applying to these classes. So the background color is applied, and if color is yellow, then it will say color, foreground color is red. Otherwise, for all others, it will say white. So that is the conditions and iterations together configuring and using for your content. So this is generally more better in performance. We can configure the effects and we can define the styles in an easier way. So a lot of programming is involved inside this Sass also. But this is not complicated for us because We already know programming, just only we need to know here syntax. And rest of you have to think according to your presentation, and you need to apply. Do I need to repeat the colors or change the colors? So because you have an option, CSS selectors, you have an option. In the CSS selectors, you have even colors, odd colors. But for every item, different colors and change them dynamically, that's not possible. So for that, again, we have to write individually. Now this is possible with the help of these options. That is technically how we can configure and use these conditions, loops and iterations. Loops and iterations. Conditions are defined by using if. Loops are defined for. Iterations are defined by using each. Even this SAS will support reusability of a set of styles by using a concept called mixin. Actually, mixins are used to configure a set of styles so that you can import them in any location and you can use them without writing it. That means we can access from any file and use from any file. Across files, we can access the styles and use them. So for that, we have to use mixin. Mixin is used for configuring the styles, and include is for importing the styles. Include is for importing the styles and using the styles. If you want to import and use the styles, then you can just use this include, and you can use in any location. So it is same like a function. It is same like a function. So that means what you do is you write a function like mixin is a function name, any function name. And in that we can have parameters. Function can have parameters and functionality. So wherever you want to use, just you have to access include the function name. And if it is expecting parameters, you have to pass the parameters. Otherwise not required. Reusability concerns will be there. So you don't need to rewrite. We can reuse and we can configure them. That is the advantage of this. It can be parameterized, it can be parameterless. We can configure them and we can apply them. So for example, that means parameters, single parameter, multiple parameters. Parameters can be defined with some direct values also. So these are very simple. So it's like a function. Generally, we call them as function. Actually, there is a function concept also. The generally difference between mixin and function is we have mixin, we have function. Difference is mixin is void. So function return. That means mixin is no return type. So function is return type. It can return a value. Reusability concerns will be there. We can easily reuse them. For example, suppose I want to apply some effects. How do we write the functions? So simple. So let's see a simple. Here I am writing @ mixin. We have to use mixin. And mixin name. So that means the function name. Function name I given as effects. Okay. And into that, so you can pass some parameters if required. So the parameters you can pass into it. Suppose I'm passing the variables, means arguments. That means here I will say $BG color and $border. These are the two parameters it is expecting. And we have to access container. And in the container, background color will be, so $BG color. And border will be $border. Just like how you learned your general JavaScript functions. But this is having a set of functionalities. So if I want to apply some effects, so that means suppose we have this. So for class, I am giving a class as container. Okay, now I want to apply some effects for that. For the container. So that means these are not applicable. We have to access them by using include. We need to access by using include. So include, we have to define effects, and it is expecting two parameters. BG color. So I define the BG color as yellow. You can use color names, color codes. Border, I defined that 2 pixel solid red. That's how we define. Now, once you do this, that means you are just writing this and you are calling it. In single line, you can apply all of them. You can apply background, you can apply borders, you can configure anything. So that is technically so how you can configure the effects easily. You can reuse any number of times. We can reuse any number of times. We can configure and reuse any number of times. So when I run this, you can see, so it is going to apply that. See, in CSS, it is going to generate normally. It is going to generate normally. That is reusability. Now, actually, it will apply here. Actually, we can get it from other files and we can use and implement that. We can get it from other files also. That means other files means we have to create in a separate file and we need to access from file and use it. So for that, we have to use import. That means we have to configure import. And through import, we can import and we can use it. You can use it. But what happened is in the latest versions, the importing of files, the importing of the files. So configuration of import, some versions are not supported with the import functionality. So we have to use an alternative technique and implement an alternative technique for that. Means earlier have a different process, but now another process we have to follow. So that means importing the files is very important, especially because already this Bootstrap, if you see, it is using that technique. Everything it designs separately and brings and keeps in one location. So it will configure that. Generally, how we can handle that, how we can access and use it. See, for example, this effects we are not writing here. So we have another file. We are creating another file. So that is card.scss. Card.scss. In card.scss, we are writing this. Now that means this effects is not present here. It is present in a separate file. And I want to use that effect here. This effects function is not present in this file, effects file. Then we have to import. We have to import. Import the specific file location here. We have to import that file. That means we have to import the card. So that is the card. That is the location from where we have that. The file name. So not its extension. So it have to import the card. And it should define the file name from where it is present. If it is present in a separate folder, folder name / file name, you have to define that. Now, generally, when we compile this, so in effects.css, the same is working now. But actually in card.css, this is written. And in effects.scss, only we imported it. and we are using it. And you see in effects.css that is applied. That means we are importing from another file and we are using it. That means now the final file contains only the contents. Only the contents. You can access the functions of that file and you can use it. For example, I will have another file, add another file. So accordion.scss, accordion.scss. Here I am writing some options. So that means here I am writing some effects. Effects is nothing but, so for list item, so margin bottom as 20 pixels and the border as 2 pixels solid red. Like this we define. Width as 200 pixels. Here it can use its own variables, effects and everything. We can configure that and define. Suppose here we have a dollar border and border is 2 pixel, so solid and red color. And we can access that dollar border and use here dollar border. Now I want to use these also, accordion style also inside the effects file. Then we have to import import and accordion. We have to write like this. Only the file name you have to configure. Only the file name you have to configure. And you can see that. So it is accessing that and using it. And in your effects CSS file, both will be there. And finally, that is applied to your contents. It is applied to your contents. That's how you want to configure. So that means you can add so many. That means everywhere you have to write this. That means suppose I am writing here, so margin bottom, so margin top, so 20 pixel, and background color, so some light coral, something like this. So some light cyan, something like this we define. And we compile the final file and automatically it will compile everything and display. So we don't need to compile every file now. Every SCSS file we don't need to compile. Suppose here we have so unordered list and list style as none, like this. We don't need to compile this accordion. We don't need to compile this card. We have to just import those two inside this. And we need to just run this. We need to just run it. And automatically you can see it is going to affect everywhere. This is how generally everything is built. You observe carefully the Bootstrap CSS. When you see the Bootstrap CSS, the file that you are importing in your project, so in your page, that is actually in Bootstrap dist CSS bootstrap.css. You are importing bootstrap.css, but observe its SCSS file. You will see the Bootstrap SCSS file. You see the Bootstrap SCSS file. It contains importing of all files. That's it. It imports the functions, it imports variables, it imports mixins, it imports the root. It imports all this. That means all these have different effects. And finally, all are imported into one file. That's it. And this file you are using in a page. So actually, you are not using this file directly in the page. You are not using this file directly in the page. You are using its converted CSS file, which is present here. And it is extracting all those files and it is generating thousands of lines of code. Thousands of lines of code. That means actually in our effects CSS, so we have only 3 lines. So 3-4 lines code is present here. And finally, when it go to effects.css, it comes with, you can see all the 16 lines code. Means all effects are extracted and effects are used here. That is import. So that is how in real world we build the effects, we combine the effects and we define them. That is the basic approach of configuring the effects and using the effects in application. That is the basic you need to understand about SAS. You also have functions. That means, for example, I want to write a function. So then how we can write the functions? So what is difference between a mixin and a function? Difference between mixin and function is quite simple. So in mixin, what happens? So it is void. It will not return anything. In a function, so we can take the base margin. Based on that, we can apply the effects. That means, for example, suppose function can return a value. It can use return. So for example, I am defining here the values. I am configuring the values like this. Suppose I am adding the value at the top. Let's create a function. So at the net function. And the function has set margin. That is the function. And in this function, we are accessing the base margin. It is expecting a base margin. So the base margin we have to take, and we have to apply the left margin accordingly. So that means it should return. So at the net, we will use return. It should return. So base margin into, so suppose we have a left margin. It should return base margin and left margin. That means, for example, it should return some value. Suppose here we have a dollar left margin, and left margin is 10 pixels. And we have to access this and apply to the container. For container, we are setting the margin. For the container, we are defining the margin. So that means I am writing margin. Margin is coming from a function called set margin. It is expecting the value. So I'm passing the value into it as, so 10 pixels, the margin. So that is for container. Similarly, for unordered list, I have margin, and I am defining the margin as, again, we call that set margin function. We will put as 5. That depends on your requirement. That means you are accessing that margin and you are applying. And you see the 5, 10 into the left margin is 10. 10 into 10, that means it will be 100. So here it will be 10 into 5. That means it will be 50. So that's how the margins are applied, the configured. And you see here, when you go to the CSS file, you see the margin. So for the container, how the margin is applied, 100. For unordered list, it will be 50. That's how it is configuring the effects, and it is displaying. It is changing the effect. The margins for the main container and the margin for the list items, it is changing. So 50, 100, it is adjusting it. So just functions, difference is functions allows you to define a functionality that can return the value. So mixin will not return a value. Function will return a value. If you are evaluating a value, returning the value, and want to use the returned value, then we have to use functions. Otherwise, we have to use the mixins. That is the difference between a mixin and a function. And anything you can import into a file and you can access and you can use it. So that is the approach of configuring and working with the functions and mixins and importing. This is how SCSS will make your CSS more little better. But this is only for developers. That means browser cannot understand your SCSS. That's the reason if you are writing very lengthy, complex effects, and a lot of effects need to be built by yourself, then you use this and design so that it is now translated into CSS and it is applied to your content. That's the basic thing. So this is how SCSS is used for making CSS more better. These are all the options in SCSS. Variables, data types, operators, statements, similar to your JavaScript programming. That's the reason if you are good with programming, you can easily handle all this. Now, next, after understanding this, now we have to go into now server-side development, means backend technologies. Now we need to know how to integrate and work with databases, server-side technologies, and create database, interact with the database, and work with server-side interactions. That we will start from the next session, tomorrow onwards, okay? Tomorrow we will start working with backend technology, how we can interact with the backend APIs, creating and working with them. Tomorrow we'll continue, right?